Welcome to our first ever episode of Akoni Tech Talks. Joining us today to kick off our first episode is CIO and IT leader Daniel Jacobs. A very warm welcome to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much for having me.
Correct.
I'm delighted to join you on the first podcast.
And so, Daniel, you have over 20 years experience in technology leadership across a multitude of industries. Your expertise spans digital transformation, ERP consolidation, data analytics, cybersecurity. But take us back, where did that interest in IT and tech first start?
I'm going to date myself by telling you this story, but I think I was probably about 10 when I got my first computer. I played Doom and Wolfenstein and later on Duke Nukem 3D and then Quake. And I kind of had that experience in the 90s when I was at school where, without knowing it, I was interested in IT. And by the time I kind of graduated, IT was really taking off. So it was kind of like a natural thing to go in that direction, because that was what the market was kind of saying. And actually, it was something that I felt really passionate about and I enjoyed. So that's kind of the gateway into it. It's just that kind of curiosity about technology, that real passion for learning about it, playing with it. And then as you go into like a proper IT job, you realize that it's quite different, but it's still exciting and it's still fun, and that you can still, always learn and, get to know new technologies.
Mm-hmm. And so, as you say, you're clearly really passionate about it as well, but when you were sort of first looking at how to break into the industry, what pathway did you follow?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was difficult then. I think it's even more difficult now if you're young and want to come into IT. I think there's a lot more competition. Back then, I did certifications. I did MCSE, I did A+, I did Network Plus, I did Security Plus. I did all of those certifications in a hope that if that's on your CV, you get an interview and you get a job. What I found was back then, and I'm sure it's the same now, it was very difficult to get a job because every company wanted you to have experience. It doesn't matter that you've got qualifications and the theory, but because you haven't got that practical experience, it's really difficult to get a job. So my very first job was a 3-month contract on a help desk, answering the phone, logging tickets and solving issues. And I loved it. I always kind of felt that you need to kind of earn your place. So I just kind of said to myself, I'm just going to have to work harder than everybody else. Be there first, leave last, and kind of do that and just not say no to anything, just kind of, just solve issues and just be easy to work with. Yeah. And that's kind of how I got into it on a help desk. And from that company extended my 3-month contract to a 6-month contract, which I was delighted by. Felt really proud that they recognized that I was kind of adding value. And then, I stayed at that company for about 8 years where they carried on investing in me, helped me learn, helped me develop. And I left there as a kind of like a senior infrastructure analyst to go into my first kind of managerial role at Mothercare, which I spent another 8 years at Mothercare, which I found was almost like university for me. This big retail business that had a retail business in the UK, its own manufacturing business in Asia, and then this huge international franchise business as well. So suddenly you're kind of thrown into that, and you have to learn, and you have to just kind of keep going and solve problems, and that was just amazing. And you get to work with all of these really talented people, and I think that's really the big thing that I can kind of reflect on. I've just been incredibly lucky to have always been surrounded by really talented people who are really passionate, and I've been able to learn from them, and maybe some of them have been able to learn from me. I don't, probably not, but I've just been lucky to move from one amazing group of people to another amazing group of people. And when I joined Mothercare, which is again a long time ago, websites was something new, e-commerce was something new, so you could put in e-commerce websites, order management systems, warehouse management systems, all of those things, and everybody's learning together. And retail in particular is a really nice industry because it's always changing, so there's always an opportunity to learn, there's always an opportunity to improve, and everything's geared around what the customer wants. How do you delight the customer? So if you can kind of work back from how do I delight the customer and translate that back into an IT solution, that's kind of where the magic happens, and then be able to motivate people to get passionate about that, to start solving those problems. I've genuinely enjoyed that. And then latterly, my last role, I was a CIO, like you said, which I would say, coming out of my kind of mothercare world into a CIO position, you feel a little bit like an imposter. It's like, should I have this job? Because suddenly, the CEO and the CFO basically just trust you to get stuff done. And, you're on all of these formal board meetings and you kind of wonder, how did I get here? Am I supposed to be here? Am I good enough to be here? So that imposter syndrome is a little bit of something to work through, and there's techniques that you can use to help you through that. But I think humility is a really important thing. I think you're always going to be surrounded by talented people who can help you, and I think that building relationships with people in a company, we all wake up in the morning to do a good job. We all wake up and come to work because we want the company to succeed. And I think that's probably, if I could go back and give my younger self some advice, I would kind of say focus more on that, focus more on, building those really meaningful relationships with people, focus more on learning what problems do they have at work and how can you solve those problems. Because I think, from an IT perspective, we can't really add value to the end customer directly, but indirectly we can raise the standards by delivering a really good service. If we deliver a really good service to our internal colleagues, and they are expected to deliver a really good service to our end customer, it's a really good way to show that we respect them, because we want to deliver the best possible service, and there's an expectation that gets passed on to the end customer. So that's kind of my whistle-stop tour of my career today.
And you touched on part of your time almost feeling like you were at university. Uni has always been seen as one of those kind of traditional routes to break into every career, but I would say now it's not necessarily the case. There's so many other different paths you could follow. I mean, what are your thoughts on things like diplomas, internships, apprenticeships?
I would advise my children to do an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
That's what I would personally advise them to do. I think if I think of all the people I know who have done degrees, very few of them are actually doing the thing that they studied. And I think that kind of is a question that you need to ask yourself. Are you willing to commit those years of your life to go and study to achieve or attain a degree in something that you're not going to be using? Is that money well spent? Is that time well spent? Are you going to get that time back? You're almost better off taking a gap year and going to Australia and sitting on a beach. And I'm biased, saying that. It's just, I've got an amazing wife who's got this really posh degree in political science, and she's never worked in political science, right? So that's a bit of a joke between me and her. But I don't know. I would say an apprenticeship scheme. And also the thing that most companies now do is, it's not unusual to see a company that has its own kind of university, where they onboard you and they train you and they develop you. And also I think more broadly speaking, if you think about the whole education system, is it fit for purpose today? If you think about AI, if you think about the technology that's disrupting how we work, if you're kind of at that age where you have to make these decisions, it's quite difficult now, I think, compared to when I had to do it.
Yeah. And when you spoke about your time being on like the desk, kind of taking calls, helping with technical queries, moving into your next kind of official role after that, when you truly felt like you were working within the tech space that you'd felt passionate about all those years ago? How did you find that transition? What was it like getting that first role?
It was like a quiet, slow transition for me. So I stayed in the same company where they, made me a permanent employee, and, then started to kind of help and develop me. And again, I think I had lots of mentors around me. And although they probably would never have thought of them as mentors, that I see them as mentors, and they really helped me shape my, kind of align my aspirations to things that I can achieve, and they helped me understand a career path. Although informal, it was never something we sat down to say, here's a career path, but there's, if you do this thing, then you can do that thing. It's like IT is quite, I think starting on a service desk or a help desk is a really good place to start, because you get to know the company, you get to know the people, you get to know the processes and procedures, and then you get to know the technology. And it's a launch pad. It's not somewhere you should stay for too long, but it's a launch pad to get you into whatever you enjoy, and it's an opportunity to see what the next thing could look like. You can have a look and see, do you want to do project management? Do you want to do infrastructure services, network services, comms, cybersecurity? You get insights into those things. So I think it gets you to become familiar with what you want to do and what you potentially may enjoy. And or an opportunity to try something and see if you enjoy it, and then that can help you kind of go into your next career. But I think I wouldn't be surprised that the majority of kind of younger IT guys are probably in the same company for a while, and they get progressed at that same company up to a point where there isn't any opportunity to progress further, and that's when they change. Is what I think is probably the most common scenario.
And thinking about the way technology has evolved and the kind of tools or systems you used when you first started out your career up to now, do you think that the way technology's progressed, it's harder to learn or more difficult to use, or do you think it's relative to the time period?
That's actually a difficult question. I don't think it's become more difficult. It's certainly changed. But again, I think, if I think of, this dates me again, if I think about all the technology that I've worked with in my career, a lot of it doesn't exist anymore. So I think the lesson maybe, or the advice that I can give to somebody that's younger and starting out on this is, don't be too wedded to the technology, because it may not be here in 5 years, but be sure that you learn the fundamentals of how it works, and that you can transfer that knowledge onto whatever future products come along, so that you've got that broader understanding of the technology. And then if something comes along to displace technology, be passionate and curious, and try to learn that as quickly as you can.
And you mentioned during your time at Mothercare, you were very fortunate to have that kind of progression path and evolve. How did that progression feel to you to ultimately reach that position as head of IT?
Again, it's something that kind of surprises you a little bit, because it's I think, in retail you work really hard, right? You do long hours. There's always some problem that you need to solve, and then there's all of these relationships that you have to maintain with people. So a lot of it's down to, I think, recognizing that somebody can solve problems, and can deal with that and deal with the stress, and still keep people motivated. And another part of it, I think, is earning trust. Being somebody who other people in the organization can trust to just get stuff done. It's no more complicated than that, in my opinion. And I think that happens kind of, there's quite a lot of people that don't want to do that. There's a lot of people who enjoy the particular area that they work on, and they could do that for the whole week and be completely content. And certainly I wouldn't say management's a thing that you should go into if you're not really willing to go into it, because it's not always fun. You're almost always just dealing with problems and solving problems. So you need to want to be a problem solver, I think, and you need to want to be somebody who, certainly in an IT capacity, is you're a service and you're serving other people. So you're almost like that restaurant manager who has a restaurant full of diners in the evening, and somebody didn't have a nice dinner, they're going to tell you about it, and you're going to have to deal with it, and you're going to have to deal with it in a way that wants them to come back again. So that's definitely the experience that I've had with the kind of moving into that managerial, more senior position. And I mean, I've just always enjoyed it as well. It's something I just feel like it's just kind of comes natural to me, so I don't really have to put too much effort into thinking about all those things.
And after your time at Mothercare, you land your role as CIO with Jardine Motor Group. How was the transition? Did you notice that there were big differences moving from a brand like Mothercare into Jardine Motors?
Oh yeah, it was significant. So I think the kind of retail world that Mothercare was versus the automotive retail world is very different. So you've got a lot more regulations and compliance that you need to deal with in automotive retail, because you're financing cars and you're selling insurance. So that's an added complication that you need to navigate. And also you're moving products that are a lot more expensive, and you're also working in a franchise business that you don't. So as much as you've got a large organization that you are responsible for, in truth it's a franchise business, and therefore you're not really fully in control, because the manufacturers will tell you what to do, and you need to align with what they want. But then if you've got 25 brands of vehicles that you sell, you've got 25 manufacturers that tell you what to do, and you need to come up with a common solution that satisfies all of them, but also satisfies all the stores that you are responsible for. So it's a very different model, which I loved. I think my time at Jardine it's been the best job I've ever had. It's been the most amazing people I've ever worked with, and I found like the 6 years that I spent there was again like almost like the evolution of you and the evolution of your career, and yeah, it's just something that was absolutely amazing for me.
I feel like it would be a missed opportunity if I didn't ask you what your favourite car was.
You know what, a lot of people ask me that, so I was very spoilt. I could really drive any car that I wanted, and after a period of time they become like beans, they're all the same. So I think now I pay no attention to the type of car that I drive, because they're all the same. But I mean, like I've got 4 children, so I've always kind of had to have a car with 7 seats. So I've always gone between like a Mercedes GL or Mercedes or an Audi Q7. Or BMW X7 or something like that, something that's got 7 seats. But there's very little difference in them, to be honest with you.
Practical over the looks.
Practical over the looks, and it's interesting actually that most people that I work with became like me, a little bit apathetic with a car's just a car. So it's definitely ruined that, because I was a petrol head before I started this job, and now I've just kind of, it's all just it's got 4 wheels and it starts and it gets me from A to B.
Exactly. And so tell us a little bit about your involvement with Age UK. What has that involved?
Yeah, so I joined Age UK's board as a non-executive director back in 2019, and again that is a little bit different, where the non-executive role is more of an advisory role, checking and advising executive directors on are they doing things in the right way, if they want to do something, as a non-executive director, have you done it in the past, can you give them some advice and help them and guide them, so it's a completely hands-off role. But also I think those roles exist because in a charity, the people that donate to a charity expect that the money gets spent in the right way, right? So it's a really important role in that sense. And the team of people that I've learned to know over the time I've been with Age UK is just the most amazing people. Completely dedicated to helping elderly people, solve their kind of day-to-day problems. Recently, a lot of the conversations are around a concern that technology is leaving elderly people behind.
Right.
We're closing post offices, we're closing banks, things like that, and there's an assumption that an elderly person can use an app on their phone, right? Right or wrong, I know some really techie 80-year-olds, but I think that's like a trend that's kind of being discussed at the moment from a kind of technology perspective. But really, it comes down to just working as a team and ensuring that that elderly person, wherever they may be, is going to get the most amazing help that they could expect at no cost.
We come on to trending in tech. So I don't know if you've seen, but Disney confirmed last week it's investigating an apparent leak of internal messages by a hacking group. So the group has claimed it's protecting artists' rights, but according to the BBC, the group reportedly gained access to thousands of communications from Disney employees. It downloaded every file possible. So the hackers have said they released the data because they didn't expect Disney to meet their demand to stop using AI. There's a lot of growing concern around creatives, artists, entertainers, about the rapid spread of generative AI, kind of saying it will undermine skill sets, it will damage creativity. What are your thoughts on the way AI is being used in the world right now?
Yeah, so this one's kind of interesting because the group that hacked them call themselves hacktivists.
Yeah.
And I think you'll probably see more of this stuff in the near future. They stole more than a terabyte's worth of data over 10,000 Slack channels, so they've certainly got plenty of data out of Disney. I think more from a kind of AI perspective, I mean, they talk about compensation and recognition of talented people, and I think whether you have AI or not, that's a conversation that's perpetual. But I think one thing that I'm pretty confident about is that AI can't be creative. It needs a human being to be creative. And I think AI should be seen as an aid to humans to make them more efficient. Mm-hmm. So that kind of human in a loop piece. I think you can get a lot of the manual, repetitive tasks done with help from AI, but I think a true creative person will never be able to be replaced by AI. And I think I've thought about this quite a lot, actually. I think if you think about movies that you've watched over the years, and you think of movies like in the 70s or so, it wasn't unusual to see an office building where every desk had a typewriter on it, right? Yep. I wonder if when the PC came along, did people feel threatened by a PC in the same way that they are being threatened by AI today?
Yeah.
Are we going through that same change? And actually what changed going from a typewriter to a PC? It's like, actually you just became more productive, a lot of the work became easier to do. Mm. And I think AI is going to be similar to that. So I don't see AI as something that's threatening. And also I think when you think of jobs in an organization, say for argument's sake, HR, finance, marketing, IT, is AI a threat to a particular job? I don't think so. I think if you think of marketing as an example, which is an area you're an expert in, a marketing department may have 1,000 tasks to do a month. Mm-hmm. How many of those tasks can be automated? It's not really going to automate you. It's going to automate those tasks that are possible to automate and help you with, mm-hmm. and it's going to enhance them. So so it comes back to, I think I don't see it as a threat. I see it as something that we should try and embrace. People who feel threatened by it, I would kind of say try and get your head around it, try and learn about it, and try and get ahead of it. So try and just kind of embrace it and apply it in a way that benefits you. And I think that kind of eliminates the threat.
And sort of linked with that as well, on social media now, especially with Instagram, the posts kind of say when AI has been used to create that. Do you think that's a sort of useful tool to have where people are being transparent about where it's being used?
I think so, yeah. I think sometimes especially with digital art, you don't know if it's been made by a human or by a machine. And also I think, when you think of really important things like a presidential speech or something like that, it's like you need to somehow be able to recognize that that's official or it's a product produced by an AI or something. So I think that's really important. That's probably the thing that we'll be reading a lot about in the coming years, is how do you distinguish? How do you know which is which?
Yeah.
And I would imagine that social media apps will start to have or leverage technology that will be able to detect it and tell you, because obviously a lot of people will try to convince you that they did it and not an AI. So I think that's something to watch and see what that looks like in the future.
Yeah, that kind of segues nicely into our this or that for the tech talk round. If you had to pick a favourite social media channel, what would it be and why?
I really like LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I don't really enjoy any of the other social media channels. I find I find it's just noise versus I really enjoy LinkedIn. Knowledgeable people are writing things that are useful, and you get to spend time or talk to people who are working on things that you're interested in. I'll caveat that by saying I'm really not into sport, so sport just bores me. So if it needs to be the stuff that I read need to be something that I'm curious about or feel worth reading. So it's can I learn something from it? Is it interesting? That's the stuff that I like to read.
Yeah.
And that tends to be more on the LinkedIn side.
And then coming on to battle of the brands, iPhone or Samsung?
iPhone all day long. It's sad really. I'm completely Apple, and with everything in my whole house and all my children and my wife, everybody's just on Apple. So I'm definitely an Apple person. I probably shouldn't be because of the whole closed system, but I can't help it. I don't want to have problems when I'm at home with technology. I'll deal with them at work.
So are you an Apple Music person over Spotify, or?
I'm actually a Spotify person.
Right, okay.
And I don't know why. I find that the playlists on Spotify are far better than the Apple Music ones. And I think Spotify somehow figured out how to get to know your taste at a freaky level to recommend new artists that you may like. So I think Spotify's definitely got something there.
It's really clever. And in terms of so streaming services, Netflix, obviously there are others available. Are you a streaming person, or you can't beat going to the cinema?
I love a cinema.
Yeah.
So I think I've always made a point to see certain films at the cinema. It's just not negotiable. And before I moved to where we live now, not far from where I lived, was an old 1930s Art Deco cinema, which this goes back about 5-6 years now. But you could go and see a film for £7, believe it or not, and it was just this really beautiful building. Didn't have huge screens and didn't have great audio, but the building made it feel special. And the advantage was that kids hated it because it didn't have the Dolby 3D sound and all of that stuff. So I could go to the cinema and really enjoy my film in this beautiful building, which was quite magical. So I really, that's the one thing I miss, having moved to another part of the country.
And are you a laptop or a tablet person?
Oh, a laptop. I have a tablet, and I hardly ever use it. I need a keyboard.
Yeah. And so with the way technology's going, if you had to pick ChatGPT or virtual reality?
ChatGPT, the whole virtual reality thing, I don't think I can get. I think I'm too old for that.
The games with the glasses.
I think that I'll leave that to my children. I'm definitely not going to get into that. I prefer the real world.
And so, are you a phone call person or a voice note person?
I'm a text person. I don't like voice notes. It's like, you could have just texted me. Why do I now have to spend time to listen to this? I could have read it in a second. So voice notes really frustrate me. Do you like them?
I find sometimes it breaks down the having to have the phone call and waiting for someone to pick up. So, and if you're in a hurry, just a kind of quick record, because I don't know if
I don't do phone calls. People phone me, but I never phone anybody. I do Teams calls. So I'm on Teams or Zoom or Google Meet. That's kind of the types of calls that I have. And beyond that, it's a text message or Teams message. My wife will phone me.
Yeah.
She phones me all the time for the most stupid reasons. But yeah, I'm definitely more of a text person.
Yeah.
The fewer words, the better.
The less to do as well.
It needs to be so short that they think you're blunt.
Oh, and finally, Daniel, if you could bring back one original piece of tech that has either now evolved or it's sort of since ceased to exist, what would it be and why?
You're going to laugh, but like Microsoft used to make really nice trackball mice, and they don't make them anymore. And I would love to bring them back. But beyond that, I can't really think of any old technology that are worthy of coming back. I think, the way I would say the one thing that I think should change is right to repair. Because if I think of when I was growing up versus my children, and if children today have an interest in technology, and if you imagine they've got a PC or they've got a tablet, the tablet's just glued together. So they can't really explore or play or disassemble, and if this one's broken and that one's broken, can I make one out of two of them?
Yeah.
Children can't do that today if they're interested in trying to learn how to do it. So that kind of whole right to repair thing is something that I think we should fight for, because I think we're putting things in the bin that could easily be repaired, but they're being designed that you dispose of them. And I think that's something that I think we should really try and get sorted. I think it's a ridiculous situation that we're in.
I feel like for me it would be a Walkman. I kind of miss flicking through my CDs.
Did you have the mini disc?
No, I didn't.
You skipped that.
No.
Okay. I quite like the mini disc, but the original iPod,
yes,
I think that still has a purpose.
Yeah.
But then I think again, with now you pay a subscription to get access to all of the songs. Back then, you owned all of them.
Yeah.
And all of those songs that I owned back then, I don't know where they've gone.
Yeah. On a download somewhere.
Yeah, they're somewhere. I don't know where they are. There's really nothing that I think warrants coming back. No.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today, Daniel. Thank you so much for coming on.
Likewise.
That brings us to the end of episode 1 of Akoni Tech Talks.